You mentioned your business partner, Vanessa. I'm gonna make the assumption that she's a woman.
She is. She is.
Yeah. So I wanted to know what challenges did you guys face when you were opening your business, and also what challenges do you face daily as women in business?
Sure. This is a big one. When it came to opening, I opened up the nest space on my own. And so for me, a big challenge was doing it on my own. I was very aware that my strengths kind of lie in coming up with the idea, building it up from the grassroots, getting it out there. And I had always known that when it came to like keeping it going afterwards and letting people know about it and growing it, that's where my struggles are. That's where my weaknesses are. So at the beginning, I really enjoyed the process of finding the space, figuring out the look and feel, getting the brand mission and everything together. But after that, I felt very isolated. I felt like, as a woman, a lot of people tend to assume when you first tell them your business, everybody kind of envisions a very small kind of, I don't know, something they minimize what you're doing very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
from a base of presumption of, of women, I suppose, not being able to have big things. So that was something I struggled with. And then me and B, when Vanessa came on, the things that we struggle with every day are quite similar. People tend to underestimate us. We have people who good-heartedly, I think, tend to worry about us. So we've had certain situations where people overstep the boundary of, you know, giving advice and just assuming that you need advice or that you're struggling and that you need to be supported, which is a wonderful thing, because I think, everybody wants support.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's from the intention of, oh, I don't think you're capable from the get-go, then it's a bit problematic. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something that we definitely experience. And then when it comes to pitching new ideas or expanding, we often have to do the extra work of really making sure that when we present ourselves as having had the experience, having gone through this before, having a valuable network, being, high value individuals. We almost have to state that for people. It's not like a natural assumption that they have. And I
Mm-hmm.
think males and white males in particular kind of have that assumption on their shoulders from the get-go. People kind of assume that they're capable as soon as they walk into the room, and then it kind of gets undone during the
Mm-hmm.
meeting from there, whereas we kind of have to build ourselves up and
Mm-hmm.
prove that we're worthy to be pitching these ideas before we even get there. So that's definitely a challenge. And then the last one that we've experienced is, there's not much out there in terms of information of how to do this. I
Yeah.
think that for a lot of women, we kind of get sold on the path of working for somebody else from the get-go. I was speaking to my one friend from school, and I was saying in LO and even with guidance counseling, we were always guided towards being told that we needed to aspire to jobs where we were working for other people, lawyers, doctors, accountants, whatever it may be. And I think that's because women haven't operated in those spheres before. So we're still at the point where if a woman is a lawyer or is accountant, that's already like a big pat on your back and something to aspire to. But the disadvantage of that is that you leave school believing that that's your only option. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think a lot of women get told that there's a whole entrepreneurial side of life that I think a lot of women would thrive in, because we are so good at creating things and coming up with ideas. But from the get-go, you don't always get the motivation of being told that this is something for you and that this is something that you can do. And so you start off being on the back foot of not really knowing, okay, if I start off my own business, what is this whole thing around ownership? What are the relationships between investors and owners? That kind of knowledge is lost on you unless you specifically decide to go and work on it. Whereas I think men have a bit more access to that because it's presented as an option for them from the get-go.
So what you mentioned right now is very interesting. I remember at the beginning of lockdown, a lot of things were affected. So somebody tweeted that the one positive, it wasn't really a positive, they were making an observation that these conferences where you're paying 5,000 Rand for a seat and then they ask these keynote speakers who are big women in business, they ask them questions like, what is the definition of a strong woman in 2020, I'm not really giving practical advice on this is how you start a business, this is how you apply for funding, this is how you do this is how you do that. The tweet was basically saying that they're happy that those conferences now are not happening because that person thought that they were scams. And I thought about it, and I really thought you have these conferences, entrepreneurship, what, and you attend them, but what is the value that you get out of them other than the sense that you can also do this?
Yeah.
Because when you mention it now, and as I'm thinking, how would I go about registering a company? I also don't know. That's still some information that I need to go find.
Exactly. And what ends up happening is I think when we enter the sphere of like entrepreneurship and business and stuff, there's an assumption that the foundation has already been laid. So people I think people who host lectures and conferences around these topics kind of assume that you've had a whole education behind you, which has taught you the building blocks. It's almost like having a
Mhm.
conference around different books. And if you're hosting a conference like that, you assume the person can read, they've learned the alphabet,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And the same thing is true of business, but our educational system is completely lacking in terms of
Yeah.
that. We don't get taught anything around business or managing finances or tax even in school. And then you enter the real world and you're there's a gap, I think, there between people assuming that people have all of this knowledge of how to register a business. And so when people are giving advice, they kind of assume that that's already out of the way, and they jump way ahead to the skills that you need after you've done all of the legwork. And then you end up leaving those conferences feeling like you haven't really learned much, because yes, you'll be able to take that great advice later on, but how do you even get there? How do you even get to the point where you are that strong woman,
Mhm.
that strong boss babe that people like to talk about? How do you even get there? Now I'm already being told about how I must be as a leader and as a boss lady, but I don't know how to manage having employees or even hire someone from the
Mhm.
start. So I think there's a very big disconnect there.
So these are very important points that you mentioned around being an entrepreneur in business, and I think a woman in business, and I think that they resonate across the board, even moving away from women. I think that they resonate within entrepreneurs who are people of color. The access issue, access to
Yes.
funding, access to loans. These are still things that we have to fight against, and it's across a plethora of industries. I wanted to ask you, what are the biggest factors or issues that resonate with you that affect women daily?
Hmm. What? Where do I start?
Another hour.
um, I think one that I'm going to touch on, just one. I think there's so many, but
Yeah.
one issue that I find constantly is triggered within me is the relationship that women have with their bodies. And that's down to um, issues of self-worth, and what the female body that we have all been told to aspire to, the shape that body is in. I think it's starting to change from, we used to have the super skinny model aspiration, and it's changing now, but it's also changing to something that's problematic, where now it's kind of that what is that thing, strong not skinny. So now everyone must be ripped. Everyone must now have a six pack and like killer thighs, and
Mm,
and that's problematic too, because for some of us that isn't accessible. Some of us can't work out every day, and so that is a big issue I find for me, of what the image that we are sold as women of what our body should look like, and how that generates a lot of self-worth issues, self-hate in some instances. I think that's very problematic. But the issue around our bodies is not just in terms of the harm that we inflict ourselves on our bodies because of us not loving it. But the other issue with that is our bodies never belong to us as women. I've been really struggling with exercising in lockdown because I'm very aware that if I want to go for a jog or for a run, I can't go unattended. Women joggers are very, very strong people because the thought of going out and running, having to make sure that the clothes that I wear cover up every single thing, just in case there's a car driving by with a male who wants to initiate something. The experiences of running and being catcalled or worrying that someone will come after you while you're running are still very prevalent. So that thing of us not really feeling like we have ownership of our bodies, or of knowing that if someone is stronger than you, that they can take over ownership of your body in an instant. I think that's something that's huge, and that links then to gender-based violence and how female bodies have been the brunt of so much violence because we as women don't have ownership of them, and men don't see them as belonging to us, but belonging to them. And then also that also translates to, I think women have been disillusioned about the fact that our bodies hold the keys to our healing, you know. That's a huge thing for me as a yogi, where when I experience discomfort in my body or I experience limitation in my body, that's a sign for me of an area that I need to explore and something that I need to tap deeper into, because there may be residual trauma that is being held in that part of my body. And so it's up to me to heal my body in that way. But women I don't think we've been taught to see our bodies as modes of our healing. For a lot of women, our bodies bring us pain and trauma, you know, and so we view healing as something that happens externally to us, where we need somebody to guide us through our healing or somebody to tell us how to heal, when actually the best tool that we have for healing is our own bodies. So those would be the issues, the issues around the female body and how it's been colonized and commodified, and how we've been separated from it.
It's almost like you're free, but you're not free. Touching on the first point that you made across, saying we've moved away from the skinny ideal and now we're moving on to the strong ideal. But also, like, you have a platform like Instagram, which we're using today, where the ideal body for women is to have a big bum and a skinny waist, you know? And also with the running, because now you can't exercise when you want to. I know with my running crew, I always stay behind with the last woman, and we also pair up to make every, I don't know, man run with a few women, because in that way they feel safer, and that's how they can get their run in. Now in lockdown, when you're alone, you don't feel safe to go out in the streets, and I think this has been a problem throughout the years, and it's now worse because with the prevalence of gender-based violence, these cases that keep coming up.
It's so true. And also, I mean, it's so, I often say to my partner, to Fez, and I'm like, it's a completely different scenario, you know. It's even though, I mean, I've also had the experience in running groups where the guys will stick with women. That's also demoralizing, you know. I mean, that's obviously the only way that we can deal with it now. But it sends a message to you, okay, now if I want to become healthy and fit, I need a man whose schedule I can link into, who's also has to be keen on the day to exercise with me. I need a man to be able to optimize myself and improve my health. And that's not healthy either. And so you end up having a very strange relationship with your body and strength as well, because, you know, running and exercise is all about building up strength. But now if you already need a male chaperone to build up your strength, what does that say about your relationship with your strength and how you'll feel about it coming from you and being unique to you, if you always feel like there has to be somebody else to help you, even to build it?
What you said right now is actually eye-opening for me, because I don't mind volunteering to run with the last woman or whatever woman who's willing to run at my pace so I can adapt to their pace. But yeah, it goes back to that I need a man narrative. And I, for one, am against that narrative. In fact, all my friends who say, I need a man, I need to be in a relationship, I need a husband, I'm always trying to, voice my opinions against that. So it's very interesting that, again, it goes back to that I'm a woman and I need a man to do anything when I'm all about perpetuating independence, independent women. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a tough one.
making
I
sure that,
think I think that allyship is such is a really important topic to talk about because so often when we are fighting to empower certain groups who've been disenfranchised, the immediate it's very tempting to believe that that group, whether it's women, whether it's people in the queer community, whether it's people of color, that group will be able to take on the movement themselves and bring about change. But the importance of allyship is the fact that these, if you are an ally, such as a man who's helping women, there's definitely a role for you to play because unfortunately we do live in a world where men still have power, and so
mm,
it would be futile for women to branch away and to say no, we're going to do this all ourselves, as opposed to having the difficult conversation with men or with allies of how they can be supportive, how they can play a role in the movement, and then rallying together to bring about change. And I think that's something that people are still having to navigate. I think to be able to welcome allies into a space where they can help you, there is a level of healing that has to have been done because
mm,
there's a sense of acceptance of being able to accept that help and knowing that it's coming from a place of assistance and allyship as opposed to again being offered from a place of you being
mm,
disenfranchised. um, but it's important, and I don't think we'll be able to get through what we're going through now in separate groups of people fighting for things. We need to be able to come together in a way where we can empower people, but to empower them in the right way without I think a lot of people get into this mode when they're helping others of the savior complex sometimes
mm.
of providing help, but providing help in a way that doesn't really empower the person, where if you step away and stop providing help, then that person is kind of left empty and
Mm.
helpless as they were before. And it's about how to empower people in a way that you can then pass over the power to them, so eventually they won't need you to help them in the long run, and they'll be able to sustain it on their own.
Moving away from the running as an example, are there any issues which resonate with you in terms of women in sports? This could be professional sports or amateur sports.
Yeah. I when I was doing competitive sport, one of the things that I was really challenged with was always being compared to the male ideal. And I used to do short distance running. I loved it. I loved athletics. I did hurdles, sprints, and things like that. Um, and then when I started competing in varsity, majority of the athletic squad were male. I actually think I was the only,
Mm,
yeah, there was a time where I was the only woman. And so whenever we were training, I'd have to do drills with the guys. And so I was always coming last, obviously. And I was always compared to them. And I think even within sport, whether it's amateur or not, women are still compared to men, and men still set this baseline for everybody. Even though we have separate events
mm,
and things like that, people will always look at, for example, female runners and say, yeah, she's good. But if we compare her record to the male record, then we all know who's the best in the long run. I think there's even a thing where when it comes to the Olympics, the male events, the male final is always the last event, because it's almost seen as there's more anticipation for the male event than to watch the females competing. You know what I mean? So I think that's an interesting one of how we get to a point where women's sport can be seen as women in sport, not women in sport as compared to men. And I think that's something that still needs to change.
That last point you mentioned about the men's event, I think it was the last Olympics that Usain Bolt was competing in. And that last 100-meter race, it's like so the tweet was, I think it read that the 100-meter race is done now, so the Olympics are finished. And this was 3 days before the Olympics were actually going to conclude. So yeah, those type of that issue is very important. I remember watching a series on TV, I'm not sure if it's still playing, where it was a men's baseball team. And they had one woman playing on their baseball team. I think it was baseball or softball, one of the two. And it was very interesting to see how she joined an all males team and she had to work twice as hard to even be recognized from her team to her fans to the management as well.
I mean, look at our soccer team, you know, our female soccer team, our national team is incredible. They are like, they are the most incredible. But when it comes to the recognition that they receive, people, Bafana will receive more exposure for them losing a match than Banyana Banyana will receive for winning, you know? And so it's just this thing of, yes, now we're at a stage where we'll allow women in sport, you know, we'll let them take their space, whatever, but it's still seen as secondary. It's still seen as like the after event, or the secondary event when women are competing, and that definitely needs to change.
That also translates, even moving away from exposure, it also translates into how much they get paid. There's huge gaps between the pay, yeah, that's also a problem. Pivoting away from sports, so this is happening because of COVID, actually. Because of lockdown, I actually now have the time to play around with technology, see what I can do to enhance my platform. So this is something good that has come out of Corona and COVID. How has it affected you personally?
Wow, it's been the biggest. I think I will reflect on this year and see it as the year where I was really forced to be with and sit with myself. Like you, definitely has been the much needed push that I think I needed and our business needed to go online and to think about how we could use technology more effectively to broaden our range and our services. So that's definitely been something. But I've been on the self-care, self-work journey for a while. And no matter how many retreats you go to, how much time you spend doing yoga, there is really nothing like being forced to be at home for over 100 days to get you to know yourself and all
What
of
day
the.
are we on?
I have no idea. When we hit 100, I was like, okay, it's over 100 days. That's all I need to know. When we reach 200, I'll be like, okay, 200 days. Yeah. No, it's been to be with myself without the distraction of going out, of being around people is enlightening, man, because then you realize, you know, when you're having a bad day at home, what do you do? Do you start criticizing yourself? Do you start beating yourself up and feeling guilty? Are you kind with yourself? If you're having a day where you're productive, how does that look?
We're forced to be with ourselves.
Yeah, and there's nothing to distract us. There's nothing, you know, there's nothing else that we can focus on. Even the news nowadays is news of like celebrities and their problems, you know, their personal problems. It's like you can't, now it's really up in your face where there's not much happening. There's no events are happening. There's nothing really to report on. And so the most important thing and the only thing you really can do is be with yourself. And that can be an uncomfortable experience, seeing and sitting with yourself through you know, the majority of a year is something that I think we're all going to remember and we're all going to look back on and be able to say that we grew from this experience because of that.
And how was your business affected throughout this lockdown period?
Wow, it's been crazy. So I think what's been hard is the way that Vanessa and I do business is we plan for the future. So we never just, once we reach a point where we're feeling comfortable, that's usually the sign to us that we need to start doing something else and we need to start expanding and doing something different. So it's been a bit challenging having that mindset when the future is so uncertain. We're currently unable to use our space because of regulations, but we still have to pay for it. Our landlord still requires us to pay for our rental and things. And so that has brought a lot into question of, you know, if a big part of our business is space, you know, I think a lot of people play different roles in the industry. Some people are on the journey of being, you know, yoga teachers and offering workshops and things like that. Our purpose in the space is to provide the physical space for people to be able to do this, which is really important. And so if that's our major business, this has started to bring up conversations like ownership of the space. Is it better then for us to own the space? So if some uncertainty comes along again, we're not put in the situation. Is it better to rent the space? So if something comes along, you can move out and pivot very quickly. Those are things that we've been having to think about, but are, to be honest, questions that you know, are worth us working through and worth us having to ask. And maybe if COVID hadn't have happened, we would have been comfortable just where we were and we would have cruised for a little while without having these conversations, which are really important. So it's been a lot. It's been crazy, but I'm grateful for it. I know it sounds crazy, but I think, like I said, I think a lot of us are going to be able to look back on this year and to reflect on the growth that has happened this year.
COVID has brought about questions like, do we really need, for us in corporate jobs, do we really need to be sitting in the office? And then also, do we really need to be in those big fancy buildings? You know, and then also, do we need to be stuck in traffic to actually do our work? So those kind of questions have arisen. And I think over the next few months, we're going to spend time answering them, because now a lot of us are not working. We're working from home. So all of that space, like with you, is being paid for, but there's nobody using it.
Exactly.
And if we then say, okay, I'm not in the space, so I'm not going to pay for it, I'm going to terminate my lease, that has a ripple effect, because now the other owning company doesn't get the rent, you know?
Exactly.
Major questions. And I think COVID has disrupted our lives. That's evident for everybody. What do you think our new normal is going to be?
Can I go for the dream? What I dream on?
Yes.
I think our new normal is gonna be a world where we value where we value family and home and comfort a lot more than effort into a lot of the tension was going to work. I think our new normal boundary of being able to tell people when we need space, when we're going through a hard time, or even when we need support and when we need health. And I see us moving into a world where there's a little bit less attention on the aesthetics and the status and, you know, the cars that everybody drives and the clothes that everybody wears. I think after what is probably going to be about 8 to 9 months of not seeing any of that, and having to wrap our heads around that not being important, I don't think we'll go back to a world where that becomes the main thing again, where that becomes what people are aspiring to. And I think we're going to move into a world where a lot more people are aspiring towards their freedom. I think COVID has brought up a lot of people's constraints, whether it's the fact that, you know, they're in a small house in the city and it feels really cramped. And if they wanted to, they could move out to somewhere where, you know, it was a bit more spacious and they're in nature more. Maybe that's something that will come up more. Maybe we'll start to see that a bit more. I think constraints in terms of work, if people have been feeling like their work isn't really serving them, I think more people are going to feel like they have the ability to take the leap to change and adapt to working for themselves a lot more, which I think is really exciting. And I think a lot more people are actually on the self-care journey now, where, you know, if you haven't been practicing self-care during lockdown, sure, I don't know how you've been getting through it, because
Mm,
it's a wild ride when you aren't kind to yourself. And so I think that's something that people will move into even once things open up, of is this kind to myself? Is this habit something that serves me? And if something like this was to happen again, if something like
mm,
COVID was to happen again, how prepared would I be to be stuck at home for even longer, you know, or to not have my job? And how can I set my life and create a life that would allow me to still have the freedoms that I know I want, since they've been taken away during to COVID, the freedoms that I want, and to be able to live the life that I live after it.
On your last point, I remember watching a show on National Geographic. It featured families who were preparing for something. They didn't know what it was. They all had different objectives. Some of them were saying nuclear war, others were saying a disease.
Wow.
So they would prepare these. They would prepare these. They would prepare supplies. You know, they build another shelter. And I remember just looking at it and thinking, these people are preparing for Armageddon, but when is Armageddon really going to happen? And I didn't think it would happen in our lifetime. And in a week, life literally just changed.
Yeah, it makes you realize that nothing is certain. And so if you're the type of person who lives your life waiting for something to happen, waiting to get that big paycheck, waiting to buy that car, waiting for that partner, this is just goes to show that life's unpredictable. You know, you can't be waiting for
Mm,
something to do what you want to do. Now's the time to do it. And it's up to you to do it, because life is going
mm,
to be throwing things at you left and right that you're never ready for. And so there's no reason to wait for security. And also, stability is an illusion. Now we know, you
yeah.
know, a lot of people haven't started their own businesses, or taken the leap to actually pursue careers that they love, because of the stability that their nine to
Mm,
fives give them. But now we can see, if your company feels like laying off people due to the pandemic, that's what they're going to do. And that much needed stability that you thought that you had is going to be gone in an instant. So why not? Why not take the leap of faith? Why not do something that you enjoy, if you know you're spending most of your time working for somebody else and building up their own business?
mm. I'm in agreement with you. I think a lot of, like, our new normal is going to be a lot of people chasing their dreams. And I also think our barriers, our geographical barriers, won't disappear, but they will be lessened, in the sense that if you wanted to work, I don't know, in America, you could work in America now, or work for an American company, because a lot more things are going to be technological.
Totally, totally.
Mm.
It's exciting. We all thought 2020 was going to be the year, guys. Let's see if it's 2021.
It is the year. It is
The
the year
year,
of disruption.
yeah, exactly. He was like,
It is
oh,
the year of trying new
looks like
things, you know?
this.
My last point, it's not my last question, it's not really even a question. My last request is for you to share a message for the women of South Africa for Women's Month.
Hmm. What message would I share? I think the question would be, I would ask a question, and I would ask every woman out there what their ultimate dream is, or what their ultimate dream for this lifetime is, to ask themselves if they really believe that they achieve that dream, and if not, to interrogate the why not. I'm wanting to use this Women's Day to interrogate the barriers that I know I have, in terms of believing that I can achieve what I want to achieve. And I think a lot of women should too. So many of us have been taught to dream small, to be small, to have our dreams be us being the partners of great men. Um, and so yeah, I think it's really useful to take some time to reflect on those dreams that we have all had when we were growing up, that a lot of us have let go of, a lot of us have begun to believe that they aren't possible, to investigate why, who's planted the seed of
Mm,
you believing believing you're not worthy of that dream or that you can't achieve it. And then taking active steps of whether it's journaling, whether it's working with friends even, you know, where you talk about these negative self-beliefs that you've acquired that have told you that you aren't good enough to achieve what you want to achieve, and to use Women's Month to work through them. So that at the end of Women's Month, you know, not only have we shed the light on the issues that women face, such as gender-based violence, femicide, issues in the workplace, all of that, but we also move through this month dealing with the internal stuff as well. Because I find that once you deal with the internal, once you've settled on acknowledging the things that are limiting your self potential and your evolution, once you deal with those things, then you actually can go into the world and affect change for other women who have been in the same position as you. So that's what I would leave. That's what I would leave women with for Women's Month.
Anesu, I'm so happy that our paths crossed,
Me
because the
too.
first part of your message, I think, reflects what my personality is like. So my colleagues often tell me that I shouldn't become a psychiatrist because my patients are going to kill themselves. Because if you come to me with a problem, firstly, I'm gonna ask you what the problem is, what the cause is, and how we can work towards fixing whatever your problem is. I don't like pity parties, you know, and sometimes people want pity parties, and I'm not about that. And I don't like it if I gave you steps on how to do something or what you need to do, and then you don't do it, because then I'm like, why? But this is gonna solve your problem. Why didn't you do it? So
Yeah,
yeah, thank you so much for joining me this
my
evening.
pleasure.
Um,
I did want to say that I give runners huge props. I don't think people really acknowledge the mental game that running is, and how much of a meditation running is. And I think it's so cool that you've started to branch out and to see the similarities between running and different sport, because I think one of the main people really tend to draw the links between different forms of sport and exercise and mindfulness, and how running and all of these sports can kind of be seen as a moving meditation. And I just think it's so cool that you are having these conversations around different sports and asking these questions around how movement can bring about self-development. And yeah, I was just giving kudos to you for everything that you're doing and the chats that you're having. I find it inspiring. And yeah, I just wanted to give you props for everything you're doing as well.
Anesu, thank you so much. I think we could speak the entire night.
Forever.
I enjoyed your conversation, your insights, your thoughts. You made me think about stuff that I've never thought about before. And you changed my perspective on certain things. So thank you for that.